Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Bashkortostan in Russia. Bashkortostan is located in an interesting spot. You can see there's a little corridor here separating it from Kazakhstan. And it's also home to part of the Ural Mountains, which come sweeping through here. You can see U-R-A-L, the Ural Mountains, which traditionally separate Europe from Asia, at least the European side of Russia from the Asian side of Russia, and Bashkortostan is considered part of Europe, technically. Quite mountainous here, and it's all very lush and beautiful, of course. There are some interesting mountains that are going to come up in history, known as Shihans. And Shihans are these really interesting, just lumps of mountains that are made of salt, and they're quite sacred to the Bashkir people. And like I said, keep them in mind because it's going to come up in history, in recent history, actually. There are 4 Shihans. The most famous one that we'll look at on Google Earth later is called Tratau. And it's so fascinating. You'll see it on Google Earth, but it's like just flat land with just like a lump of mountain coming out of it. And it's all white and shining. Obviously, with ancient people would say that and be like, that's a sacred mountain, of course. There are many, many, many rivers in Bashkortostan. Of course, with all of these mountains, you get snowmelt, creating lots of rivers. This border here is made up of 2 rivers. The Kama is up here, and the Reka makes up this entire border here. Both, I'm pretty sure, flow into the Volga River, which is not terribly far from here. There's also the Belaya River, which you can see it's marked here, Belaya, which is important because it flows through the capital city of Ufa. You can see there, Ufa, U-F-A, Ufa. Even though there's lots of natural beauty here, it's quite industrialized, a little corner of Russia here. The biggest by far being petroleum. There's oil, natural gas. There's also lots of iron, copper, of course salt. Salt mountains, of course. You get lots of salts in the soil. But one of the most interesting products to come out of Bashkortostan is its honey, because it is still collected in a very traditional way where it's harvested wild. They have aviaries, but for the traditional honey, there aren't any. You have to go out in the woods and find it and harvest it just so, and apparently it's the best honey. It looks really good, and I'm not a big honey person. I'll eat it, but I'm not like a fan of honey. It looks creamy. It looks really good. Apparently, it's part of a cosmonaut's diet in space is Bashkir honey. Isn't that neat? But it's one of the few places left in the world where honey is still harvested that way, and I believe the only place in Russia where it's still harvested that way. Let's see. I think we'll get into history next, because next in my notes I have talking about the Bashkir people. So that goes right into history. So let's just hop in that direction. So, of course, people have been living here for a very long time. There's lots of neat little cave paintings dating from ancient times throughout the mountains here. But, of course, the main indigenous people are the Bashkirs. So they were first mentioned around the 7th century, but surely they've been here for longer than that. They are a Turkic people group, which means all of the countries down here are typically Turkic, obviously like Turkey, but Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. I want to say the Kazakhs, but I believe they're more Mongol, but the Mongols are also Turkic people, so probably as well. The Bashkirs traditionally practice Sunni Islam, but there are some that still practice a very ancient religion called Mari. And I grabbed my tablet to kind of show you some pictures because there aren't any on Google Earth, at least in this part. There's a region called Mari El, which we'll obviously get to in a long time, which is not terribly far from here, where it's like that's where they officially practice Mari. But so this is a prayer service happening here. You can see they go out in the woods and they cook a bunch of stuff around the fire, and that's where they do their prayers, at least from what I understand. Around all of these big smoky fires, you can see right there, praying. One of the last widely practiced pagan religions in Europe, and obviously there's quite a few pagan religions in Europe, right? This one has like never been stopped being practiced, right? It's quite fascinating, and it's officially recognized by the Russian government as a nationally recognized religion, which is really cool because Russia is very Orthodox Christian. So, 1 point for Russia, I guess. But yeah, I thought that was interesting because I've never heard of that religion, and I got to learn a lot more about it while researching this, and I thought it was really cool. I hope you enjoyed too. So anyway, speaking of the Mongols, the Golden Horde would come through conquering this area, and this region here in Bashkortostan would be controlled by the Kazan Khanate. Kazan is also not terribly too far. You can see Kazan. And the Bashkirs were in some dire straits and they needed help, so they went to what they presumed would be their nearest ally that could help them, and that was Muscovy. And they said, hey, Muscovy, this is in 1552, by the way. They said, hey, Muscovy, could you do something about these Mongols? Because we don't want them here. And Ivan the Terrible he was the first Tsar of Russia. So he said, absolutely. Just so you know, you never ask the Russian Empire for help. The Russian Empire no longer exists, so that's not shade toward Russia today. I'm just saying, if you're a time traveler and you need help with something, do not go to the Russian Empire. They always have ulterior motives. So Ivan the Terrible certainly chased out the Kazan Khanate from this area, and they absorbed it into what was then called Muscovy, which was soon to become the Russian Empire. Pretty much was at that point. He established Ufa in 1574. It was a big hill fort there, and it's only grown since then. It wouldn't take much longer for the Bashkirs to realize that the Russians had ulterior motives for these people, and that they wanted these people to be Russian, and they weren't. There were some insurrections in the 1660s and 1700s, pushing back against all the changes that the Russians were trying to make to their daily lives and their culture. I know one of them was that they passed a law stating that mosques had to look like Orthodox churches, which we're going to see the most famous mosque in Ufa. It does not look like a mosque. They call it the Cathedral Mosque because it does not look like a mosque. It looks like a cathedral. So a lot of pushback during that, but the most famous pushback came from a man called Salavat Yuliyev. He fought in Pugachev's rebellion between 1773 and 1775. Pugachev's rebellion occurred when Catherine II, or Catherine the Great, essentially staged a coup against her husband and took over the government, and people fought back against that, including Salavat Yuliyev. He was eventually captured and died as a slave in prison, but he is the national hero of Bashkortostan, and we'll see a really cool statue of him in Ufa when we go to Google Earth. So Bashkortostan just kind of reluctantly went along with Russia being kind of frenemies until the Russian Empire collapsed in 1917, and they decided this is our chance. Like many parts of Russia at that time, they said this is our chance, we're going to be independent. And once the Soviet Union came about and they started negotiating, the Soviet Union said, you know what, we're going to recognize that. You're going to be part of the Soviet Union, but you're not going to be part of like the USSR. Essentially, you're going to be an ASSR, an autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic within the USSR, which was very different at that time. Before it was, oh, well, you'll have your own corner as an ethnicity, but you're part of the USSR. They let this culture be autonomous because I guess they were just functioning pretty well. The Soviets wanted them on their good side. So they retained their autonomy throughout the Soviet Union. Doesn't mean that it was a happy time. Many people who were exiled from their homes in places like Ukraine, like Lithuania, Estonia, over there in the Baltics, not the Balkans, well, probably the Balkans too. It's embarrassing how often I get them mixed up. The Baltic states. Many of those people were exiled to Ufa, leading to population issues. Not to mention, there was a really terrible famine at one point that they call the Bashkir Holodomor. Which, if you don't know about the Holodomor, it occurred in Ukraine in the 1930s, and let's just say it's where the word Holocaust comes from. It was a devastating famine. So the USSR falls in 1991, and what happens here? Well, Gorbachev came and said, listen, you're going to stay autonomous, don't you worry, and people were so happy. And sure enough, once Russia became Russia that we know today, they retained their autonomy, and people were like, fantastic, like we've been autonomous technically since 1917, everything is great. Until it wasn't, when a certain someone became president of Russia. And what was it, 2005? And that was, of course, Vladimir Putin. And he, with the quickness, found a way to completely shatter Bashkortostan's autonomy. It's like today, Bashkortostan is autonomous in the same way that Russians have like a democratic vote in elections. Technically they do, but do they really? Anyway, Putin has been wilding in this place. Obviously, he wants all of that good oil that's in there, so the oil industry has ramped up. But also, remember those Shihans I told you about, the salt mountains? He wanted to completely mine them out and flatten them and mine out all of the salt and minerals in those mountains. And people here were furious because those are sacred. They used to be, fortifications. I'm sure rituals occurred on them. There was a huge protest movement against that. And from what I understand, it did not happen, but it was coming awfully close to those mountains just getting completely bulldozed. How tragic that would be. Many protest movements have sprung up against Putin and the Russian government here in Bashkortostan, and it has absolutely ramped up since the invasion of Ukraine. From what I understand, most Bashkirs are very pro-Ukraine and want to see them victorious over Russia. And from what I understand from many of these rebel groups and protest groups is that if Ukraine wins, Bashkortostan is next in rising up against Russia. And that will give them, one, the power, the will to do so, and number two, Russia will be so weakened politically from losing the war in Ukraine that they will get what they want. And of course, the goal is complete independence from Russia. Now, there are lots of Russians that live here. I think the population's like 36% Russian, but this is the Bashkir homeland. And, this happened quite a few times in the 1980s, very early 1990s. And they want to do it again. They want to bring that back, independence from Russia. Of course, many of these rebel leaders live in exile today. The most famous one is in Lithuania, pushing for Bashkir independence. And of course, you have to be very careful here with how you say and how you act, because it's Russia. So, with that being said, that is the end of our history lesson about Bashkortostan. Fascinating, right? I have literally never heard of this place before I started researching. Never, ever. And I've had just a delightful time researching it and watching videos of Bashkir people just gleefully explaining what life is like in Ufa and their culture and their food. It's been wonderful. These people here seem very, very nice. But you know what? From my experience, at least, Russians are very kind people deep down. They're a little haughty. You have to get through a tough layer, but once you do, they are so warm and kind. It seems like Bashkirs don't really have that tough layer like most Russians do. At least that's from personal experience. But I'm going to stop yapping and head over to Google Earth because we have to check out this place. I have some really cool things to show you. So let's head over. Let's check it out. Here we are in, let me grab my pencil, the Republic of Bashkortostan. Let's start by zooming out so you can see exactly where we are. Russia's a very big place, so it's important to know where exactly in Russia we are because it's so massive. Just right here. So there you can see Kazakhstan. Ukraine's just over there. There's the Caspian Sea. You can see this area here, how it's all kind of brown and flat. That is the steppe region, which kind of bleeds into Bashkortostan. The parts that aren't mountainy have a lot of beautiful steppe, but you can just see this just gash of green right here, which is beautiful, lush forest here in the Ural Mountains. This makes it pretty easy to find on a map like this, where it's all just geographic locations. You can find just this big swath of green, kind of like, where was it? Over here. You can find these big old stripes, kind of like that, but just a big old gash of green there. Let's see what's in that big old gash of green. If it'll load. Of course, Google Earth had some trouble loading earlier today. We can see this beautiful park. I'm not going to try pronouncing. That's a mouthful right there. I would say the South Urals. Isn't that gorgeous? So beautiful. Beautiful meadows, gorgeous trees, rivers and streams. Lots of clouds there in the early morning, I presume. It's stunning, right? Oh, how gorgeous. I'd love to go hiking here and exploring. It looks so lovely. Lots of cool rocks and cliffs, of course. And of course, in this winter when it's all snowy, it's all so magical. Just have to be careful driving. Look at the somewhat frozen river. Looks like it's breaking up there. Let's see, there's another right here. I believe this is like the Bashkiria Nature Reserve, like the Bashkiria. Bashkiria is its like actual name. I probably should have said that in the first part. Most people here don't say Bashkortostan, they say Bashkiria. But it's also just stunning, as you can see. Little village there. I think we have one more slideshow right here. See Bashkiria. Can you see Bashkiria? That's a beautiful picture, isn't it? That gorgeous tree there. Oh, are we gonna load? There we go. Oh yeah, there's lots of cool oxbow lakes in Bashkortostan, and like you can see, there's some about to form in who knows how long. We'll take a look at those if you don't know what an oxbow lake is. Something that's very common in Europe, not so much in North America where I live. It goes a little bow with a Russian flag there. I guess it's Russian colors too. But yeah, you get the idea. This is more of the steppe you can see there. Just beautiful flat land, pretty fertile. It's perfect for grazing cattle there. Let's check out. You know what I'm going to do before we head to Ufa is that we're going to see this mountain I promised you, Tortau. Zoom on in. See, look at this beast. Look at that. Look. Can we get a 3D? Yeah. Just this rising mound out of this flat earth. So yeah, you can imagine being, a primitive pagan person and seeing this and being, oh yeah, that's a sacred mountain. For sure. For sure. I think this is my favorite slideshow. You can see some of the views from the top. It's still very popular to climb this big guy. Because how could you not? It's so tempting. Lots of paths going up. So you can soak in the sights. You can see all of the white, kind of chalky, salty gravel there. Take a selfie there in front of it. Pose for Instagram. The neat little signs you drive toward it. It's a gorgeous mountain, isn't it? Can you imagine seeing this and being like, oh yeah, all I see is rubles. I'll just flatten it and let's get all the money we can out of it. I can't imagine. Oh, look, a fossil. That's so cool. Yeah, because the reason it's made of salt is that this all used to be underwater. Isn't that something? I think this is on UNESCO's tentative list, I want to say. I feel like I was reading about this mountain on UNESCO. They brought their frack. Wow, all snowy too. That's neat. I haven't seen any pictures of this place in the snow. It's pretty awesome. Alright, let's head over to Ufa. Get this out of 3D. But yeah, there's 4 of those mountains, but that one's by far the most famous. You can see a salt farm here. Digging out all kinds of saltiness there. Let's go to Ufa. Once it loads, there it is. Ufa. So you can see it's called the White River in English, but the Balaya River, snaking on through there. Oh, let me show you over here. You can see there's an oxbow lake. There's a bunch. Where was it? I think further down the river, where there were just like tons of them. I feel like I'm not going to find them now. Of course. But basically, once you have a curve like this, which probably not this one because there's a big city right there. But let's say a curve like this looks like an oxbow lake. Eventually, the water builds up, and just kind of cuts off. It's a terrible explanation. Someone's going to explain it. How oxbow lakes work. You can see one would be forming right here. Eventually, of course, not anytime soon. Let's go. So I remember finding a ton near Ufa. Maybe it was down here. Oh, here we go. Oxbow Lake. Little oxbows. All near the river. Here's some. Is that neat? Just a neat little, you can see it looks like a dried up one right there. Little oxbow lakes. But let's go to Ufa. Here we go. So I have lots of things to show you here. This is an important monument. The site, I think this was the site of the original Bashkir Kremlin, the original fort built by Ivan the Terrible. So they built this monument here to commemorate the solidarity and togetherness between Bashkortostan and Russia. I wonder if there's going to be a close-up of the inscription. So it's really neat. It's very, like, it looks brick, and I haven't really, so that's cute. Not a lot of brick things in the city, so it really stands out. But it was made, I want to say, on like the 500th or something anniversary of Bashkortostan joining what was then Muscovy, right? So, kind of iffy now, but at the time it was a big celebration. So here's that mosque I told you about, the cathedral mosque. Because yeah, look at this. It's only one little minaret, and it looks like a little church, right? But it's not. It's a mosque, and that's because of that very ancient rule. So one of the issues going on between Bashkortostan and Russia right now is that Russia's like, you know what we need? We need a fat Orthodox cathedral. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see if I can find it. They said we need a huge cathedral, and it's going to be all blue and beautiful. It's not this one. It's about Christmas, it says. All blue and beautiful and gorgeous. Big old fat cathedral. Now, of course, I can't find it. It's like massive. Goodness. Wonder if I can just type it in. Let's see. Ufa. Maybe that was it. No. Oh, it is. That was it. Just didn't look like it from above. This fat mosque. We got it. All gorgeous and inspired and blue, and it's gorgeous inside. It's violently blue. It's a beautiful blue, right? Absolutely stunning inside. And so the Russian government threw all this money to this cathedral. Meanwhile, and I can't find this at all on Google Earth, they've been trying to build a huge, beautiful mosque, like an actual mosque with 4 minarets, all big and lovely, like mosques are. And the city can't get any funding for it. It's all funded by the people who live here donating to it. It's not finished, I believe, from what I read. Thank you to Mosquepedia. I've used that website so often with information about this mosque. So it's like the people here didn't want this huge, beautiful cathedral. But Russia delivered it anyway. And then the actual thing that they want is this big old mosque, and they can't get it finished because Russia won't help. So up here on this hillside overlooking the city is the great symbol of the Bashkir people. If you'd stop spinning for like 2 seconds. Like 2 seconds. Thank you. Here's Salavat Yulayev. There he is on his horse. Being victorious, I suppose, overlooking this beautiful city. And what's neat is that this slideshow is going to show you the statue, but you can also see a lot of the buildings nearby. There he is, all lit up, protecting the city. You can see this big conference center built on the hill here, the Tortau, I believe, and the hotels that they've built around it. There was a BRICS summit here a few years ago, which is an economic community between, let's see, well, R's for Russia, I's for India, C's for China, the S is for South Africa, the B, I've blanked. What's the B for in BRICS? I've completely blanked. Anyway, it's an economic community there's a lot more other countries that have joined since. So it's the name of the original hill here. So it's a big important center there, and he is protecting it forever. Neat building too. I like the shape of it. And let's see, I feel like there was one other thing I wanted to show you. What was it? I don't remember. I do not remember what it was. So it must not have been that important if I don't remember. But let's find something to look at. Let's turn off the everything filter. And let's check out, I guess this park. Oh yeah, I was trying to read about this old tower. I couldn't find much about it, but it seemed very prominent because it's also all kind of bricked out. You can see some little oxbow happening there, can't you? I'm trying to see if there's any kind of riverside here that we can close out the video on. Boom. I knew there was. Alright. Let's check out the views of the city when we wrap up this video. The rest of the region is quite farmy, so not too many exciting things to look at, but I would highly encourage you to explore this region on Google Earth, on your own. Google Earth is totally free. And you can maybe find some cool stuff there. So thank you so much for watching. If you learned anything cool today, and I can almost guarantee you did, unless you're like actually Bashkir and you already knew all this history. If you learned something today, give this video a thumbs up. Let me know what you learned down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this style of ASMR content, be sure to subscribe because this is an ongoing series on my channel. Next, we're going to be heading over to Italy, and it's a really interesting region. It was once considered it was the poorest region of Italy, and the people there were living in extreme poverty, but the homes that were considered these poor, sad, deplorable conditions like 100 years ago is now considered special, and you can have Airbnbs there, and it's a UNESCO site. And you're gonna want to see this place. It is absolutely spectacular, even though, like I said, it was considered a slum. Now it's a thing of beauty, so be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a good night.